Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt show Professor Edward Berger, who's the president of Southwestern University. He's also the author of 12 books, including his most recent, The 5 Elements of Effective Thinking, which, by the way, he wrote with Michael Starbird, who was a guest on the Goldstein on Gelt show previously. If you missed that interview, be sure to check it out. Just go to YouTube, look up Goldstein on Gelt and Michael Starbird. You'll hear that great interview. And now, Ed, I'm very, very happy to have you here.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, Doug. Thanks so much for inviting me.
So I'd like to focus a little bit on the critical topic of your book, which is effective thinking, because in my day job, my day job is that I'm an investment advisor. I only get to do the radio show once a week. But I find that people make the most ineffective decisions on a regular basis when it comes to things like money. In your book, you talk about the importance of thinking deeply. How can you train someone to do that?
Well, first of all, it's just a consciousness and awareness of realizing that understanding is not a yes or no proposition. Wherever we are in our understanding, we can delve deeper. This might be, in fact, one of the greatest triumphs of the human spirit, that wherever we are in our understanding, we as thoughtful individuals can actually say, I want to understand a little bit deeper. So instead of thinking about something as being a yes, no, I understand or not, wherever we are, if we force ourselves to go deeper and understand deeper, we are thinking in a deeper level. And that, of course, applies to the world of finance, where people, for example, don't even think about the opportunity costs to the decisions that they make, both in terms of their own money, but also in terms of their own living.
Okay, so how can you make someone or teach someone to think deeper?
You know, it really is just a matter of embracing certain habits of thinking. You know, it's just like when we look at great works of art, whether it's performance or paintings or sculpture or literature, and we think, boy, I wish I, were more creative or I had some talent. The truth is, those people are just ordinary people, the people that created those works, but they were just doing something differently. And we can actually, instead of thinking about doing something better, it's more appropriate to think of reality, which is to do something differently. And you can actually practice those different habits of we call effective thinking. And just by practicing them, just like when you practice anything, you just get better at it, you will allow yourself to be your best self. And that's the point of education, and it's the point of our book, which is that wherever you are, you can be better. And that maybe is the definition of what education should be, is inviting people to evolve into their very best selves.
Okay, I want to talk about that a little more, but I know that earlier you said that at the end of the interview you would give us a clue for how high school students who wanted to get into a great school like Southwestern University, so they can begin to think along this line. You give us a clue for what they should be doing now, but let me follow up a little more on something else you said in the book, which is you kind of encouraged making mistakes. And I think as a student, maybe that's a great idea, but as an investment advisor or as an investor, does that apply also?
Absolutely. Now, you have to understand that when we're thinking about investments, or if you're thinking about the medical profession, making mistakes as the destination point is not strong, right? So if you lose the patient and the patient dies, or you actually lose the patient like he just gets misplaced, or if you lose a tremendous amount of money, that is not the goal. But the goal is to actually make mistakes as a way, as a process to actually reaping greater dividends, no matter what you're thinking about. So, for example, you might want to try to look at several models of things. You might want to run certain simulations and see what would happen if we look at the extreme case. If we only invest in here, or only invest over there, or if we do something that makes no sense here, what happens and why does it not work, or why would we be losing revenue? Why would we not see the returns that we'd expect to see? What you will inevitably find by taking on any kind of exercise like this is you will build some kind of insight. You either will see an opportunity that you would have otherwise not have seen, or realize that this wild, extreme stance, if whittled down to size, is actually an innovative way of, in your case, investing something in a way that you hadn't thought of before. So it's actually a very thought-provoking way to actually create and engineer your own innovation.
Mm-hmm. The fact is, it sounds like a lot of work, which I'm not afraid of, but it's interesting. The tone of what I'm getting from what you're saying is that if someone wants to think more deeply about something, you're saying, really focus on it and spend a lot of time on it. They talk about the 10,000-hour rule. The people who are the greatest in their fields, whether they're, Tiger Woods playing golf or Susan Polgar, the world-famous chess player, these are people who didn't just magically become good, but rather they worked and they worked and they worked and they spent a huge amount of time. Is your model here just work hard?
No, and I think that that's a common misperception. What we're suggesting is work differently. In fact, we will argue that once you make these 5 elements that we offer in the book, the 5 elements of effective thinking, once you actually make those 5 elements just the habits of how you live, you will actually be thinking more effectively and more easily. So it's important to move away from thinking, in some sense, harder or doing more work versus actually doing something that is different.
Okay, we are talking with Ed Berger, who's the president of Southwestern University. He's an expert in many, many fields. We're focusing now on the topic of his book, The 5 Elements of Effective Thinking. But hold on in just a minute. He's going to tell us a little bit more about what high school students should be doing now if they want to get a great education in a great school like Southwestern. Ed, let's focus on something else in your book, and I think it applies to what you've been talking about, which is people should question their own situation. And you gave the example of, imagine if you got to a real extreme, then what would happen? But how can you actually become your own Socrates, that was the term you used in the book? How can you separate yourself, because we're always so in the moment and it's very difficult to step away?
Great question. By the way, I love the fact that you said I'm an expert in many things, and we're talking because, I'm a mathematician by trade.
Well, yeah, we're not talking about math today.
Well, I was going to wonder how quickly your listeners would tune off if we started talking about mathematics. So I'm delighted you did not pick that topic. In terms of questioning, it's interesting. It's not just asking questions that we're proposing. It is the habit of creating questions. And that puts you in a different mindset, Doug, because what that does is it moves you from being a passive observer of your life's journey to being an active participant in your life. And what I mean by that is, and I'll just kind of put it in a classroom setting, you can sit in the back of the room and just kind of nod your head and go, yeah, and write down all the notes, but not really be engaged. If you take that same individual and force that individual, as I do in my classrooms and when I do leadership workshops, I force them to actually create questions. It puts you in a different mindset. If you are in a position where you are required to create a question, you have to listen and engage much more intently. And so what we propose in our book is not just at meetings and at lectures, but when you're looking at works of art, when you're watching television, whether you're listening to your radio show, whatever a person does, they should constantly be in the habit of asking themselves, what can I ask here? What am I seeing? What is being said? What am I not seeing? What is not being said? How come I'm not hearing that? And all of a sudden you become much more engaged and a much more active participant, and all of a sudden you're seeing things that other people would have otherwise missed. That's, again, how to engineer innovation.
That actually is a good point. I'm going to go back to the chess concept, because on this show I've interviewed a number of chess players, and in fact I'm working on a book now with Susan Polgar. It's called Rich as a King. It's how the strategies of a grandmaster in chess can be applied to investing. And I think one of the things that Susan has always said, and is pointed out in the book, is that you've got to look at the board from many different angles and not just follow a pattern that everyone's doing, because after a while everyone knows that pattern and then there's no real strategy there. So you're describing an interesting strategy of not being a passive observer. Do you find students can learn this?
Absolutely. Well, it's not just students. I mean, human beings that wish to see if they can be better can, in fact, embrace these habits. And the interesting thing is you can see students, and even young students, students that are in high school or younger, and certainly at the college level, I've received many, many emails of individuals saying, I'm so happy I read this in my freshman year, in my studies, because this has informed everything that I'll be doing now. And people that have read the book, the book's only been out for about a year, but people that read it a while back will say, I can see how I'm using it. And they start to send us very specific examples where they can see how their thinking has changed as a result of embracing these things. And as I said earlier, it's not that this is hard, arduous work. In fact, it's kind of fun work because it's engaging your mind in ways that your mind should be engaged. And so it's kind of a fun way to engage in life by thinking more effectively and being more creative, more imaginative, and more innovative.
Wow. Not only does that sound great, but for anyone who wants to get a copy of the book, we're going to put a link to it on the show notes at goldsteinongelt.com. So just be sure that you get it there. And we're nearing...
We made a mistake, by the way, Doug, when we wrote our book. Thanks for the little plug, but you mentioned the book. You're working with Susan, and I want to make sure that you don't make the same mistake. We put at the very beginning of our book that it's a very tiny book. It's about 150 pages.
Okay.
We said you should read the book 3 times. First, just read it very quickly. Then second, try to read and try to take the actual hands-on exercises that we offer and begin to think about them. And then the third read is the transformative read. And what we should have said, Doug, is buy the book 3 times.
I see you are a marketing genius too, not just a math guy.
No, if I were a genius, I would have had that in the book. So when you're working on your book on chess and investments, if you're going to do something like that and take our idea, make sure you say, buy the book 3 times.
Uh-huh. Fabulous. Okay, let me write that one down. But while I do that, Ed, in the last minute, just tell us, for the high school students or the parents of high school students who are listening now, do you have one tip that they should really put into play today so that they know that they're going to get into a good school?
Well, at Southwestern University, we're located in Central Texas, just outside of Austin. Really, our goal is to try to bring together a community of individuals who are thoughtful, intelligent, articulate, and want to grow. So basically, a mindset of seeing yourself as a work in progress and bringing your strength as an intellectual and your enthusiasm to learn and engage with others is really what it's about, whether it's leadership in various athletics or club activities, leadership in your scholarship and your work, a willingness to take risks and fail and learn from that. We're looking for those intellectually agile students at Southwestern University.
Okay, and so your recommendation for someone in high school now would be to try to focus on one of these areas?
Yes, I would say take risks, be daring, and be open to realize that the point of education is to mess things up, is to kind of derail your plans. Don't come in and say, I'm definitely going to become a doctor or I'm definitely going to become a lawyer. We produce a lot of lawyers and doctors here at Southwestern University, but the goal is to have a transformative experience. So if you're in the mindset of saying, I want to be transformed, Southwestern is your place.
All right, that sounds fabulous. Ed, is there any website or place that people can go to learn more about your work or to find more out about the book?
Sure. Well, certainly there's a website on the book, which if you just Google the 5 elements of effective thinking, you can find that. It's published by Princeton University Press. It's available on Amazon. If you want to follow me on Twitter, that's the only social media that I use. I'm not on Facebook because I'm too old for that. But on Twitter, my handle is my initial EBB663. That's EBB663 on Twitter. And also the book has a Twitter account, which is the numeral 5 thinking. So 5 thinking is the book, and EBB663 is my own Twitter account.
Okay, and once again, we will put links to all of those at the show notes at goldsteinongelt.com. Ed Berger, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, my pleasure, Doug. A lot of fun.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.